beautiful natural areas, and Trillium Trail was considered kind of the showcase. It was a place that everyone would take their mom and their grandmother on Mother's Day to see the wildflower display. It was just huge and covered the hills. And one year they went out to see it and it had disappeared. That was like in 1994. And people started to argue about what happened. Some people said the trillium had caught a disease. Some had said that deer ate them. There were just lots of arguments going on, and people set up, and I became part of this group, some deer exclusion plots where they fenced a small area, kept the deer out, and had paired deer access plots, which was really everything else, but they marked those and were able to count the number of plants in those plots of different species. And we were able to show that the deer were the cause of the decline of the native wildflower species because they love to eat them, and that there are just too many deer. So Fox-Chapel Borough got very excited about this, and there was a lot of energy among the people who were lovers of nature, and also people on the Parks Commission. The Fox-Chapel Borough paid for aerial flyovers, and they found that the number of deer that were using Fox-Chapel was basically 40 deer per square kilometer, which is 4 times the number of deer that is compared to like the historic average. So I've been doing research there and a number of other places since the early 90s, looking at how deer affect the native plant community, especially the understory, and also tree recruitment, and how deer facilitate invasion of non-native species that we don't really want, like garlic mustard and others. So that's a little bit of background. I'm not exactly sure what your goals are. And so if someone could say what your goals are with, is everyone worried about the forest community? Are they, what is it?
So we've been tasked with, there is a segment of Rye City and we are a suburban town outside of New York City. We have some woodlands, some wetlands, and we have several different, let's call it wooded areas. There has been some in the community that have said that there are too many deers. They've been complaining that that there's been destruction to property. They see too many deer, and we need to do something about the deer, and that's how this kind of spun up. The history is that in 2015, there was a committee just like the one we have now that looked at it, and they found that there was about 50 deer per square mile in the city of Rye. We are now trying to find a scientific, we've been tasked with finding a scientific recommendation as to what to do. So the first question is there a problem? And do we know that there's a problem? I sent you through what Jax Mack had sent to Brandt related to his deer exposures for one of the wooded areas. And the question ultimately is there a problem? If there is a problem, what can we do about that problem? And what is the most effective way to handle that? And the question for you is, how do we become a bunch of finance people, lawyers, etc., to kind of digest whatever the output is of either flying drones to see how many deer there are, or getting a study done inside inside the nature center or some of the other wooded areas to take this and say, okay, this is a problem, and then we have to define what our goals are, right? So is it biodiversity? How bad is the damage? And then we need to understand what we want to do about dealing with the damage, if there is damage. And then from there, we need to come up with a plan. So the question is, like, we're hearing, and I'm sorry for being long-winded, but we're hearing from different experts that are in the space, whether they're from the county, because they run a deer program, from the state, from other PhDs that are saying, like, you know, this is what you should be looking at, and not everybody has the same type of view. So we're trying to take a look at everything. So some of the stuff that we've heard is, don't look at the sheer number of deer. And this is hard for us to kind of wrap our head around. You know, Bernd says, don't look at the number of deer, right? He spoke to us last. But at the same time, he was using deer as a metric to say, like, look, these are how we're judging these programs. So by default, you have to look at the number of deer. Mm. And then when I spoke to you and said that communities that are similar to ours or geographically close to ours, and the county said that they thought that there was maybe 140 to 150 deer per square mile, your reaction was completely different than what everybody else's reaction was. So I think the questions that we laid out was pretty much like, how do we get from being novices to understanding what we're seeing and then being able to make a rational, informed decision based on what the science is telling us?
Sure. So I think that one of the problems is that when you're dealing with a city or a town, you have such diverse stakeholders and no one is going to agree on what is most important. And so that makes your work very challenging. I'd like to, can I share screen?
Absolutely.
So so this is it's called an infographic that a student who was in a design class that I co-taught with a designer put together. What does it say? Okay. So I think this infographic is great because it talks about just about everything. So I can't really fit it on the screen all at once, but I can show you what is important. So there, on average, 1.5 million deer vehicle collisions each year, and about 300 people die. Okay, so that's a lot of damage, and it means everyone's car insurance goes up. So if people are interested in not paying as much in car insurance, or keeping their costs low, especially at this time when people are worried about money, that's an important thing. Because deer, when they're really in high abundance, they can chow down everything in the forest understory, and they can eat the trees, the baby trees that are called the advanced regeneration, the ones that are sitting there waiting for a big tree to fall over and grow up and take its space. So it means that our ecosystems get unbalanced because we are losing diversity because deer can basically browse it into oblivion. And also it takes away the capacity of the overstory trees to regenerate. So that's a really important thing. I don't know if you can see, it says increase in erosion and flooding.
Yes.
What happens when the forest understory the trees and the herbaceous perennials are not there, there's nothing to sop up the rain when we have these kinds of torrential rains, and it can cause tremendous erosion, compaction of the soil, and flooding, which is nobody wants. So there are 30,000 reported cases of Lyme disease each year. That's a high number. Nobody wants to get it. I saw in your questions, like, well, people think it's not important. It really is. At least I think it's a health issue. And if you know anyone who has advanced Lyme disease, their lives are pretty difficult. So another big issue is that the deer go into our backyards and eat up our shrubs, our gardens, our bedding plants, whatever kinds of things we put out. Anything that they find palatable, they will eat. And there are $750 million annually that are spent on property damages caused by deer. And then this one I can't read because, this is a $26 million loss because people who have farms or orchards or anything like that, the deer gobble those up. So if people in your community don't care about at least one of these, I'd be surprised. And I think it's really important to think about it. We're not just talking about the forest. We're talking about the fact that they live in the forest and they have these tremendous effects. So I'm going to stop my sharing. So, I guess I'll go back to looking at the list of questions.
Well,
Yeah.
Susan, so I think from our perspective is that when we look at the understory, and if we do and we do determine, or we don't determine, that there's an issue, like that there's non-regeneration in the forest study, that leads to biodiversity and all that. At least my understanding is it's right. About biodiversity, right. And we're not just talking. We're not just talking about certain flowers in there. Can you extrapolate on what we mean by biodiversity within sure. the understory of the forest?
Sure. So the understory plants are kind of a foundational set of species, and the herbaceous understory in most forests that aren't really heavily impacted, they have way more diversity than the overstory. So typically there would be maybe 5 to 10 species of overstory trees. In a forest, there can be 50, 100, 150 species of understory species. So it's much more diverse, and that biodiversity supports the insects, the mammals, the birds, all the species that use the understory species as food, as forage, as housing, as hiding places. And it also, the understory, as I was saying about with that infographic, it supports the soil health and the health of basically the fungal community that supports both the trees and the understory species. Almost all the species in the forest are reliant on an association with mycorrhizal fungi. So all of that gets disrupted when the deer are overabundant, because they remove the plants, they remove the litter, they compact the soil, and these webs of mutualistic interactions and all other kinds of interactions are lost.
So the fungi that you mentioned, is that the fungi that's under the soil that is connecting root systems to each other, where they different?
The most important function that mutualistic fungi serve is they live inside the root of the plant, they grow out into the soil as hyphae, and they mine the soil for water and nitrogen, phosphorus, and other micronutrients, give that to the plant. The plant gives the fungi carbon and they can grow into the soil. So that's the mutualism. Most of those fungi cannot live outside of the plant or not in association with the plant. These plants, these fungi do make mushrooms that you see, but that's like coming up from the hyphal structures. They're all connected.
Okay, great. And then I think the question that we've asked in the past, or I think where we get held up is, okay, we have a bunch of wooded areas, right? They're non-contiguous.
Mhm.
They're it's a patchwork of wooded areas in a classic suburban kind of setting. And there's some golf courses, et cetera, et cetera. Can we use the understory of the forest as a bellwether for the rest of the community, and if there is too many deer or not too many deer, or should we be looking at something else outside of the understory, in the forest? Like, how do we?
So all the other places that you mentioned, like a golf course or a suburban community, those are all under the control of the owners of those parcels. The only place that you can get an estimate of biodiversity or deer effects in a natural or semi-natural situation is in one of your woodlots or your forests. So the easiest thing to do is to set up just some small fenced areas and see if you have things show up in a year or two that you didn't have before. What we have seen is that some of the plants that you think may have disappeared, some of the plant species, may be there, but they're just not flowering. When they get eaten year after year, they regress in size and they don't have the stored carbon energy to reproduce every year. So you have to give it a couple years before you might see a response.
Right. So Jax Mack sent through, which I forwarded to you, what he's been doing with deer exclosures for the nature.
I didn't see it. Can you?
It was attached to the email. But I think the question that I have is, they've had these deer exclosures for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. Can we utilize that as a proxy for doing?
Absolutely.
As a proxy to say, look, here's what naturally comes up, and then we don't necessarily need to do a study. We could just say, look, the Nature Center has already done this work for us. Absolutely. Because this stuff is here, but the rest of the Nature Center is barren like a desert in the understory.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, you don't need to repeat it. If the Nature Center has set up these exclosures, they've been monitoring them, and it's part of your community, you don't need to do it again if you have an experiment like that that's being done.
Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. Chris, Stephanie, do you have questions? Because I'll just keep going through the list. And
I think you nailed 3 different points that are the priorities. One is forest regeneration, which is being dramatically impacted. Second is we're a coastal community and we have issues with erosion and flooding, and many of our wooded or open areas are connected to these brooks and streams, and we have dramatic flooding of homes downstream. So your point about the forests, when they're not able to sop up all that water, it impacts those houses. Also, we have a place called Rye Harbor. We have a marina, and it continues to get silted up, and it's very expensive to clean out. Right. It becomes a long, drawn-out debate and expense. So if we can reduce the amount of silting that goes in that harbor, it'll be a dramatic cost savings to the city.
Right.
And also, if we can help those homes that live downstream by making sure that our forests are working at full capacity is important.
So, Dr.
Those are 3 points that you sort of mentioned that hit home with me. And with others that have heard from the community. So
Yeah, so I mean, and the forest along the edges of creeks and streams, I don't know if people fish in those streams or not, but the forests themselves change the temperature and the light that's coming into the waterways. And so it can really change how productive and how healthy the fisheries are as well. So that's, I mean, that's another thing. Yes, Ryan.
Yeah, so you're saying that if there was a better understory in the forest, that the silting of the downstream into the harbor, where like I mean, I used to have a boat, and I think at dead low tide it was 1.5 feet to get out into the channel.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that would be slowed, if not negated, if there was less deer in
Well, I would say if there are more plants.
if there were more plants, right? And so,
Right.
and
If there are
so-
more trees, more shrubs, more understory, more, that's plants just suck up the water and suck up, hold the soil in place. I mean, that's why when people build, they have to put those drift fences and erosion fences, because when you clear a place and it rains, it all washes downhill. So it's the same thing happening. It's just not a site is being clear cut to build a home or some other building. It's being cleared out by the deer, and the same effect happens.
Okay, great. Stephanie, do you have any questions on the understory type topics before I try? I'm probably gonna shift a little bit here, so I just want to know if you have anything that you want to ask for Dr. Kalisz.
Well, the first thing that I'd like to probably make mention of and see if it contributes to our issues and concerns with our forestry is, I understand, like, over the last few years, the city of Rye has allowed, and I believe that there has been a lot of tree cutting, and for reasons of development and such. In doing that process, and I understand those numbers are quite high, does that also contribute to any of these issues that you are flagging that's related to deer as well? I mean, could that be contributing factors?
It could. I have no idea like what the scope of and the scale is. Like if they're really clear cutting, or if they're selectively cutting, or just making a opening in a forest so a house can be built or a building can be built. It depends a lot on how it's handled.
Understood.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. And then I'd also
I
be
mean, trees,
interested.
if you could plant trees back into the areas that have been taken over by deer, you have to put up those tubes that protect them. And I mean, there are lots of things that are going on like that. Even at Trillium Trail, where we've been working hard, we put up a really big fence that the borough of Fox Chapel put up this big fence, but they're also planting trees, and they're really trying to proactively regenerate the forest.
Yeah, and I've seen some of that. Like, for instance, I see some of that being done in an area called the Osborne. I know they cut down a lot of trees there, but it looks like they have replanted some. It's just the numbers aren't as quite high in the regeneration and replanting versus what they're actually removing. So it's a big number. So I find that concerning. But the other thing that I'd be quite interested in is your thought processes on the counting of the herd and how important that is to you and what you see.
Well, I was more interested on the effect rather than the count, and I inherited the data because Fox Chapel Borough was paying for these aerial flyovers, and they handed me the data. So I was able to compare the effects of how many deer there were, and then how intense the browsing effects of the deer were. And I used kind of indicator species that they love to eat, like trillium and Solomon seal, and they like to eat a lot of things. And so I could quantify the number of those plants that were browsed each year in my study plots. That's probably something that is going on at the nature center, and because they probably have an exclosure and then they have something that's marked out next to it where they're taking data to show that, well, these plants were here, or they try and pop up and they get eaten. So, but I don't know. I mean, Ryan, do you know if they have those kind of data?
I don't know that they have that data to say like, oh, this was here, now it's gone. I believe they just basically set up exclosures and in several spots to try and regrow the forest and to teach children. Like the nature center is used as basically a nursery school for kids after school to come and learn things, and they take them through the woods, but they've done exclosures for deer so that they can actually show the different species that are native to the nature center itself.
I would ask them if they have control plots that are paired with their exclusion.
Okay.
Because that will give you a lot of information. Because, it is really stark when you go to a place that has a deer exclusion plot, and after a few years, it's just sort of green and things are growing up, and next to it, it's just staying bare ground and brown. And so, but if they don't, maybe ask them if they would.
Yeah. And just maybe plant some and see what happens.
I think they are. I think we can ask Jack Max and get that. Documentation.
I would think they would.
They've been doing it for a few years now, so.
Yeah, I would think they would, and so they can tell, even if it's not flowering, the naturalists there, I'm sure, can tell which species are coming up but not really doing well or being browsed by the deer. So they would have the comparative data that you need.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm just going to shift gears a little bit into, let's say we come up and we say, yep, there's a problem, and there are different methods in how to deal with it. Do you have a view as to what is effective, what isn't effective, whether it's sterilization, recreational hunting, or culling, or exclosures? What has your experience shown you as to what is effective and what is not effective?
Well, the only approach that I have used is fencing, and the fence is, it's like 2 miles long, and it goes up a very steep hillside, and so it's a very large exclosure that was set up by Fox Chapel Borough after we showed that the deer were the cause of the decline of the flowering natives. That's very expensive to build, but that's what I know actually works. If you have fences that are built and are maintained, that's the other part that's really important. If you have a tree fall or someone cuts the fence because they don't want to walk around or whatever, which we had, deer can get in, and so they have to be maintained if you want to protect a particularly wonderful area. And there are lots of parts of Fox Chapel Borough that are park and forest that are not fenced, but this was sort of an iconic gem that they were trying to protect, and that's why the fence was invested in. Sterilization has not been shown to work. It's too expensive. It's too time consuming. And it's really hard to, it's very hard to maintain. There's no way. So if you do surgical sterilizations like they did at Cornell, the deer don't live that long, and you just have to keep doing surgery after surgery, and that's super expensive. The kind of injectable, and people would use like a dart gun to inject a birth control chemical into the deer. That also doesn't last very long, and it's hard to know who's been serviced in that way and who hasn't. So it hasn't shown to be effective. I think hunting, culling is a good way to work on it. I think we're losing the hunters that we used to have, the numbers of hunters. Many fewer people are hunting, and so encouraging hunting among, starting hunting clubs for kids where they learn gun safety and learn how to hunt safely. The other thing you can do is feel good about predators. I don't know if you have a lot of coyotes or wolves in your area. People don't usually take too kindly to that, but predators are really good at controlling deer, but we've mostly hunted them away.
Yeah. So Susan, I have a question. So I was actually out by you in 2C. I was out there hunting in Western PA, and normally you hear opening morning and it sounds like a war zone with just guns going off, and you hear it in the distance and it reverberates because it's mountainous and they echo and all that kind of stuff. This year it was very quiet, and nobody across, my uncle lives out there, nobody was seeing anything. And I was out there for 4 days. The only thing I saw was a fawn, and I let it walk because it was like, what was the point? Nobody's seeing anything, and I was sitting on top of a cornfield. So my question is CWD impacting the herd in Pennsylvania to the point where you're not seeing that, or is this just the Game Commission has given out so many doe tags and people are just taking what they see? Or like, what's your view? Do you have a view or any thought on that?
I don't think chronic wasting disease, CWD, is very abundant in Pennsylvania. So I think no to the first question. Yes, they are giving out more doe permits, but there are fewer people hunting. I think that the deer are very adaptable and have been moving into cities and urban places where hunting doesn't. You're not supposed to hunt in a suburban area or an urban area. Yesterday I was out in front of my house and a little, I don't know how many points, maybe 3-point buck just like walked across and looked at me. I live in the Highland Park neighborhood of Pittsburgh. You can look it up. It's city, and there are deer walking around all the time. So I think that they move at different times. They can go to different habitats. They can go to places where hunters aren't. They're smart. And
okay.
And the other thing is that there have been really sort of prodigious numbers of twins and even triplets being born to the does. So you would think, if anything, they would have more. There would be more, but I don't know. I don't think that we've lost deer.
Okay.
Susan, if I may, congratulations on the fencing working. That's wonderful, and it's been able to give you the opportunity for that area to regenerate. You have over 2 miles of fencing. I just know we have these different pieces of property, and the cost to do all that and to maintain it would be prohibitive. And also, I think the ripple effects from that is that if you're fencing off certain areas in our community, then the deer
go to the other.
We still haven't dealt with the deer population, and then it has to go elsewhere. So maybe it exacerbates the problem in other spots. In Rye, actually, deer bow hunting is legal.
Oh, okay.
As long as you follow the state protocols and how far apart from certain buildings that aren't supportive of it. But I think if we determine that there's an overabundance of deer, I think then we need to figure out how to proceed to reduce the size of the herd, to right size it, if you will. So we can have, to use your words, the biodiversity, and to provide the balance in the natural environment, and which will be supported not only the environment, but like you say, to buffer climate change and to impact positively the brooks and streams and reduce erosion and flooding and all. I think that's fencing.
Oh, no, that's just what worked for us.
Yeah, well,
I didn't pay for
congratulations,
it. Yeah, I didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Great. So Susan, the one thing that kind of is one of the questions that we've kind of been stuck on is there doesn't seem to be hard, fast data. It seems, for lack of a better term, squishy, or interpretive, for lack of a better term. So how do I, a novice, and okay, so we get a report and we see that, there's no trillium, but we've got lots of mustard weed or whatever it's called.
Garlic mustard, yeah.
Garlic mustard, and, and there's no red oaks, and there's, and we've got a bunch of ash trees that are getting eaten up by these boar.
Emerald ash borers, yeah.
Yeah, and we're losing, our canopy, and we've got no understory. Like, how do I interpret? Like, okay, let's say we take the work that's done at the nature center, or we go and we have a study, we hire someone to do a study, and they come back with the study, and then I look at it and I say, okay, this is great. I have no idea what this is telling me. How am I to interpret the information that comes back?
Well, I think that what you, so let me preface this by saying that every forest, every backyard is different, right? Everyone has different tree species, different, slope and aspect, all sorts of things are different. And I would say that when you look across the science that's been done, there is heterogeneity in responses because people are working in a different kind of forest. Maybe it's a beech maple versus a oak hickory, or just there are all kinds of variables. But there have been many meta-analyses, which are analyses that take lots of different studies and basically take the data from all of them and say, on average, do we see an effect of deer on diversity? Do we see an effect of deer on flowering? Do we see an effect of deer on soil quality? Do we see, so they ask these questions, and those meta-analyses are out there. I can send some to you, and I can kind of highlight the findings that might be important for you to present to your city council or to the city in general, because it's not squishy. I mean, it really isn't squishy. It might feel squishy if you say, well, this person in this totally different place in Pennsylvania, and then this person in Minnesota, and this, we see different things, but the effects are all the same. There's a loss of biodiversity. There's a loss of regeneration, basically tree regeneration. It affects the soil. It's more compacted. It brings in invaders. Particular invaders seem to do well with the disturbance that's caused by deer. Other invaders, not so much. But there are these trends that we can see. So you don't have to say it feels squishy, or I can help you see where it's solid, where you can step and not be in a bog.
That'd be great. So I will ask Ellie. I saw you've joined. Do you have any questions for Dr. Kalisz?
No, unfortunately, I missed her section of speaking, but you seem very knowledgeable, and I agree with everything that you've been saying. So I'm sorry for being late.
Life happens.
Stephanie, Chris, do you have any questions?
No, I appreciate it, Susan. That's very informative, and thank you for your time and your input.
Sure. I'm all set. Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so Ryan, I guess,
I will follow up with you.
Okay.
That'd be great. Thank
yeah,
you.
good luck.
Thank
I
you, Susan.
appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Susan, for your time.
Sure. Bye.
Bye.
Can we get to speak?
At the
Hello?
end of the at the
Can
end
we
of
get
the
to speak?
at the end of the session, the public can comment or
I thought you guys were wrapping up. I'm sorry. I thought you were finishing.
No, I think I'm just going away. Is that right?
that is correct. We have another guest from the
Oh.
Department of Environmental Conservation.
Bye.
So I've noticed that EJ is on. EJ is from the EJ Borchard is the biologist for the Department of Environmental Conservation in the state of New York. I reached out to him to have him come and join us today to walk us through if we were to determine that there was a overabundance of deer, I guess is the nomenclature, that what we would need to do from the state's perspective in order to get permitting for the 3 different methodologies that are available to the city. The first being DMAP, which is similar to what the county runs. The DPP, which are basically nuisance. Their deer would be declared nuisance animals, and there would be nuisance tags. And then lastly would be sterilization. So with that, I will turn it over to EJ. EJ, thank you for joining and taking the time out of your evening to talk with us.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. I appreciate the opportunity. And I would just also like to mention that my supervisor, our regional wildlife manager, Jonathan Russell, is also on the call. Who may be able to assist in answering questions that I might be lacking the answer to. So
Great. Thank you so much.
I guess my first question is also going to be what Dr. Kalisz asked is what are the primary concerns of the community? There were things that were a concern of the residents to form this committee. I'm just wondering what those are. It seems like those should be the things that you would be focusing on.
Yeah.
As far as impacts go.
Brian, I think isn't one of the things that keeps rising to the top is the forest regeneration, which has a ripple effect on so many ecological impacts, from biodiversity to balance to providing nesting and forested area and living areas for pollinators, small mammals, and birds, etc. So I think that was a primary concern.
That was a large driver. There was damage to the community's perspective is damage to property, and then then you have the question of car strikes. I think is in the background, but I don't know that that's a massive driver. I think that the reality is that I think people are. I'll put it to you this way: there are deer walking through people's yards all day long, and the view, I believe, from a certain segment is like, yeah, that's great that there are deer. However, there are too many deer, and we're seeing the damage done both to property and in the forest itself. And I think that's the main driver from the community.
Okay, appreciate that. And when you said damage to property, you're talking in terms of landscaping, I assume?
There's landscaping, there's, if you walk around this town into, and I'm not talking about large parcels of land. Where I live, most homes are on a quarter or a third of an acre or something like that. The trees are eaten all the way up to 5 feet.
Yeah.
And they're bare, and then after 5 feet, there's the evergreens still have, there's nothing done to them, but below 5 feet, they're just hammered.
Okay. All right. That's that's the answer I expected. So all of these have, non-lethal methods that could be chosen, but there's caveats to all those. So forest regeneration, like Dr. Kalisz said, deer exclosures are a possibility, but then, like the committee addressed, you're then excluding deer from those areas of forest, and then they're likely to be more dense on areas outside of the fenced area. Damage to property, you could be planting less palatable species of plants, but at a certain point, deer are likely to eat those too if that's all they have. And as far as deer vehicle collisions, people can adjust their behavior, be more vigilant at dawn and dusk, especially during the times of the rut, the peak of the deer breeding season, about the first week of November. But one way to address all of these issues is potentially through the reduction of the deer population. And I guess the question that you're looking at is how to do that. So I guess I'll start off. You mentioned sterilization. We'll address that fairly quickly. In terms of immunocontraception, that is something that we would not issue a permit for unless it is part of a larger scientific research study with very novel questions that are going to help the body of knowledge on deer biology as a whole. I don't think that's really applicable here. It's also very expensive, and communities who have tried it don't continue with that method for very long. The other sterilization method would be surgical, again, very expensive, and maybe not the most practical solution. Probably wouldn't issue a permit for that alone. So then we're looking at...
EJ, can I just ask a question about sterilization with surgery?
Sure.
The work that's gone on in Staten Island, where you have a closed ecosystem, does the DEC have a view, or at least are talking about a feeling about what has happened there? And if so, can you share kind of what the view inside the DEC is thinking about what's gone on in Staten Island?
So I'm not sure about that specific instance. I haven't seen a final report of that. I will tell you that in instances where communities have done surgical sterilization, it typically doesn't go well. It's very expensive, and the reality is that a lot of systems are what we call open systems, meaning deer move freely in and out. There is the potential for sterilization to work in a closed system, being an entirely fenced-in property or a small island. I don't believe that the city of Rye would be considered a closed system. The city of Rye is an open system where deer can freely move in and out. I don't believe sterilization alone would be a very effective option.
Thank you.
Yep. So then we're moving on to lethal means, either in the form of regulated hunting or the issuance of a deer damage permit. So you mentioned DMAP. DMAP stands for our Deer Management Assistance Program. That essentially provides additional tags to landowners that can then be provided to hunters for use during the regulated hunting season, and all hunting rules and regulations apply under those tags. So something to keep in mind is that you're in Westchester County under environmental conservation law. Deer can only be hunted with archery equipment in Westchester County. So that, due to a recent change, that includes both recurve bows, compound bows, and now crossbows. Keep in mind that the setback distances for those tools are very different. Vertical bows, being recurve and compound bows, have a setback distance of 150 feet, meaning that the hunter would need to be at least 150 feet away from a building or dwelling that they do not own or have permission to be next to when they shoot. And that setback distance for crossbows in Westchester County is 500 feet. Just to keep in the back of your mind and in consideration when you're evaluating those options. The other option would be to conduct a cull under a deer damage permit. So that kind of changes the tools that are available. Under a deer damage permit, the department does have the authority to authorize both archery equipment as in a during the hunting season. But we also have the ability to authorize the use of shotguns in Westchester County. I don't know how you would go about that, whether it would be the local police department or anybody like that. But the implements under deer damage permits can differ. The times of day that you can shoot under deer damage permits differ. So it's a more flexible structure. What some other people in the county have used, or in the region, excuse me, not just the county, they have actually decided to use both a controlled hunting program. So they use hunters, and the hunters use their normal deer season tags to take deer during the deer season, and then they supplement that after the deer season with a cull. And then you have hunters going through the regular season, and then come January, February, March, they do a cull where they can use a bunch of different tools in the toolbox. They can set up bait piles, so you're bringing deer to one area, and it can be a controlled and safe area, and then either use crossbows or shotguns with slugs to take the deer in that method. So it's not necessarily a one option or the other. You can use a few different options and integrate it in the best way possible that you find.
Great. And so the process for getting a permit
Yeah.
for any of the above. So let's imagine, for example, that we were able to get onto a study where there was something unique about it for sterilization. Like, how would we go about that? Like the permitting, or would that be done by the study itself?
So the study would need to be a very rigorous scientific study with a set research proposal, and then they would need to acquire both a deer damage permit and a license to collect and possess for research purposes from our special licenses unit.
Okay. And if we wanted to do a DMAP type program, how would we go about getting a permit for that? Or is that really relevant, considering that Westchester County is the doe tags are basically unlimited inside 3S?
Yeah. So you can have a controlled hunt program at any time.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't require involvement from me necessarily.
Okay.
So you could decide, we want to have, you have city property that you want to open up to hunters, and you can make up the rules of how many people are allowed in, where they set up, areas they're allowed to go, and then they would use their normal hunting tags. If there is a property under city control that would be of interest, we can discuss issuing DMAP tags. I don't know if it would the DMAP process would be a huge difference, considering doe tags in 3S are unlimited and people can get replacement tags if they fill them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then And then for deer damage permits, is that a process that we would need to fill out paperwork, go to you for a case?
Correct. Yep. So there is a deer damage permit application. I believe I've provided it to some members of the task force, but I can resend if needed. It's a fairly simple one-page application. And then in addition to that, because you are a municipality, we would like to see a deer management plan. And that is all detailed in our community deer management guide. I believe I've sent that as well. It's a pretty good document. It's not a long read. It's only about 20 or 30 pages. And it really goes through all of this from start to finish on things to consider and things to think about.
EJ, could you send that stuff to me? Because I don't believe I have a copy of it.
Absolutely, I'll send this. And one thing that I would request, Ryan, is if there is a email list with all of the deer committee members,
I will send it. I'll send it to you.
I would appreciate that. That way I can send it to everybody on the committee, and then everybody has the same information.
Yep, that'd be great.
All right. Yeah. So the deer management plan consists of 3 simple parts: an introduction detailing the background of the problem, in a section on objectives. How are you going to address those problems? What are you looking to do? So for example, and those should be fairly detailed objectives, meaning if you have a problem with car strikes, maybe an objective could be reduce deer vehicle collisions, but an even better objective would be to reduce deer vehicle collisions to less than 15 per year.
Right.
Making sure that those objectives are as detailed as possible. And then also the methods. So how are you going to reduce those deer-related impacts? Controlled hunt, a cull, etc. And how are you going to measure success? So how are you going to evaluate those deer impacts over time? And that sounds like a very difficult thing to do. From our perspective, or at least my perspective, I realize that a lot of municipalities don't have PhDs in wildlife ecology, and that's not the expectation. So depending on what the impacts of interest are, it could be setting up plots for forest regeneration and looking at seedling development over time. Create an exclusionary plot and a control plot and see the difference between the two over time. And I also believe I had previously sent some other methods to evaluate deer impact of forest regeneration. The oak sentinel being one of them. And there's a few others I can send as well. And then, for example, if you have an interest in damage to landscaping plants, it could be as simple as sending out having an online survey that residents fill out, detailing their satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the impact of deer on their landscaping. Or you could take a more technical approach, do something experimental. Maybe people get a type of plant that deer really like to eat, and then you measure how those plants are impacted over time. Again, that's an example just given in our community deer management guide. It's really what the community is interested in and what is important and valuable information to the community.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ellie, Chris, Stephanie, do you have questions for EJ?
None for me.
Are there some communities, can you discuss about some communities that you've been working with and how these culling or these, what do you call it, these D maps or these other processes have worked and their effect.
Yeah, so we have not had a municipality do one of these programs in the Lower Hudson Valley before. So you would be the first, but I can tell you from my experience with other organizations with similar problems. One is a college in Dutchess County, and they started their program a little over 10 years ago. I want to say about 2014, 2016, somewhere in there. They have a forest on campus. It is used for teaching and demonstration. So obviously it's important for them to have biodiversity in the forest. I should also mention that it's in a fairly developed and suburban area. So it's kind of a pocket of green space in a ocean of gray. And they took the approach of, they didn't want hunters on their property, in this case, because they're college and students and whatnot. But they have people come in. It's actually folks from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, APHIS Wildlife Services. Doesn't necessarily need to be them, but in this case, that's who they choose to go with. That's not an endorsement, although they are a good organization. And so they come in and they have several bait stations and use sharpshooters over bait. They take about 20 to 25 deer per year, and they have control plots showing seedling growth over time. So they have fenced in areas where deer can't get to, and then they have a control plot next to that where deer can get access to. And they've shown that over time, the control plots that deer have access to are starting to match those plots that have no deer access. So the deer are seemingly having less of an effect on the forestry generation in that scenario.
So, so you say that no municipality in the Lower Hudson Valley are running these type of programs. So what's the difference between what Irvington and Dobbs Ferry are doing? They're basically hired a sharpshooter, for lack of a better term, and how are they managing this? Like, what type of program are they utilizing?
I don't believe they are hiring a sharpshooter, are they? I'm not aware of it.
I believe they are.
Excuse me. Is Hastings still using the sterilization?
Sorry, ma'am. The public will be able to comment at the end. Thank you.
Ryan, if I can speak to this, Ellie and I did go over to the woods and we met with them. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ellie, but I think they have some kind of a hunting program that goes on every year, and they use one specific hunter.
Okay.
And
that makes, yes. All right. That makes a lot more sense.
And
So
all the deer that they do kill over there, they take it to, is it called Amodio's? There's some kind of specialty.
Amato's farm.
Thank you,
Okay.
Amato's farm.
So that
They
would
take
be
it there, and what they're doing is then they donate all the food to
Right.
the hungry and to the needy. Yeah.
So that would be the first option that I described, where it would just be a controlled deer hunt. People would be using their normal hunting tags, and it wouldn't.
Yeah.
So in that case, Dobbs Ferry decides that they want to open their property up to this one specific person, and they are only allowing him to hunt in there, and he is using his own deer tags, essentially, or using DMAP tags available. So that would be the reason I was not aware of it, because it wouldn't be a call.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. So now I understand the difference. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
all. Good. Any other questions for EJ?
Well, I'll just ask Mr. Russell, anything I missed?
No, I think you did a pretty good job there, EJ, covering things. I'll just touch on a couple points if you don't mind, that I heard. And like I said, I think we covered a lot of good stuff there. But one thing we kind of touched on briefly was our goals. We can touch on goals briefly, talked about quite a bit. But I really think we shouldn't shy away from those impacts to ornamental plantings on private property. For most residents, that's their number one concern. The biodiversity is extremely important. It's something we certainly want to take into consideration, but I feel like, I could be wrong, but for most of the residents of Rye, that's probably their primary concern. Is that correct?
I would think so.
Okay, so I think, yeah, I wouldn't shy away from that. I'd kind of think about making that a goal. Also, we talked about, EJ did a good job of listing through the different options here. Now, as far as DMAP goes, we already have unlimited doe harvest, or antlerless harvest, I should say, in Westchester. So I don't think that's really going to help you that much. As far as immunocontraception goes, we're not aware of any program where that's been successful, especially in New York. So I would kind of suggest that's not a primary option in this situation. What is typically effective is removing deer through lethal means. And the most effective way to do that is through a deer damage permit and doing a cull. I'm not super familiar with your properties. When you describe, they're kind of these smaller parcels, urban area around them, kind of sensitive areas for hunting. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would think so.
So I mean, and EJ touched on this again, but one of the things we can do through the issuance of a deer damage permit, it is a cull. And EJ said there's a lot of different options there. You could have, local PD do it, but USDA Wildlife Services are extremely effective at doing this. This is kind of what they do for a job. And you can have a consultation with them. They can come in, look at those parcels. You have to pay them through a contract, but they can say, yes, we can do this, or no, we can't. And if they don't think they can do it in a safe and effective manner, they're not going to say they can. They'll tell you that up front. But the benefit being, they could go in, they'll pre-bait, get those deer conditioned coming to that site on a regular basis, and remove a lot of deer over a very short period of time, like a couple nights. When they first started doing, you mentioned Vassar cull, that was pretty contentious initially. Obviously a high use site, students, all that, in the city of Poughkeepsie. I think the first night they did something like 30 deer. The next night, something similar. And at this point, they're maintenance levels. EJ said like 20 deer now over the course of a couple nights.
Yep, about that.
But yeah, in a few nights, they can remove a lot of deer and get you to a place where hopefully through the use of recreational hunters, we can maintain those lower levels. We might have to still go in there and do, annual cull. But, and I'll say from the DEC, we always try to utilize recreational hunting. That's our first tool in the toolbox when it comes to deer management. We want to use that to the greatest extent we can. But in these types of situations, it's hard to reduce the numbers to something we're comfortable with through only the use of recreational hunters with archery equipment. That's just, reality is it's not the most effective way to remove a large number of deer, which I think sounds like that's what you're up against.
Well, we don't have an official
right,
number
right.
of it. But if you base it off what Irvington saw and Dobbs Ferry saw, which are both below 287, they're in the 140 deer.
Right.
And Dan Atchison at the county thinks it's probably around that or higher.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't, or if it was around there. I know every community feels like they need to justify their own program, but the reality is, like, there's a lot of documentation out there in Westchester in general that deer numbers are over desired levels. So don't feel like, I don't know. I understand you have to justify your program, but I think there's a lot of information out there that shows that, yeah, we've got a lot of deer in Westchester, and residents are experiencing some significant impacts from that. I'll also mention, so you guys familiar with, this was a while ago, but they had the Westchester Deer Task Force?
No.
Was anybody around from back then? Dan Atchison was involved in that. I can look for the old report from that, and basically what it was is, yeah, communities, elected officials, yeah, Dan was involved in that back then, but kind of identifying the fact that, yes, deer numbers were up in Westchester. How do we address that? And one thing was, you know, municipalities taking action. And one of the few things that came out of that was, yeah, Westchester County parks open to recreational hunting. But I think we should also kind of maybe revisit that. It's a little bit stale at this point, maybe not too much. I think that was done in maybe 2007, 2008, around there. But, you know, this was identified as a significant issue back then. Also, EJ, you mentioned circulating kind of a document. Was that the same one as the Cornell Integrated Approach to Deer Management, or is that a different one?
It's a different one.
Okay.
It was the Community Deer Management Guide that's on our website.
Yeah, that's great too. I might also suggest circulating that integrated approach to deer management, because it does lay out those specific ways a community can kind of assess those deer impacts.
Yep.
A bunch of different options for that. And it's good talking points when you do talk to the community members who might have concerns about the program. I guess I'll just also mention, if you did decide to kind of pursue a deer damage permit to conduct a cull, we can help facilitate those deer being donated to venison donation programs. They're certainly not going to go to waste. That makes a program like that a little more palatable for the public often, if they know those deer going to people who need them, and they'll be utilized. Yeah, I think that's all I had, but thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right, great. Well, gents, thank you for your time. Unless Ellie, Chris, or Stephanie have any questions.
I just have one quick question. You mentioned that at Vassar, the community wasn't so keen on having like hunting and those firearms, and similar to Rye, the community isn't so open to having sort of like a hunt or a cull. So how did you change the community's perception? How, like, what ways do you recommend us educating the public?
So hunting and culling are both very different, right?
Right, I meant to say culling, but
culling,
yes.
Yeah, sure. So honestly, they didn't change everybody's mind. They got sued multiple times for multiple years, and nothing came of it. But they certainly didn't convince everybody to get on board with this. But they felt like it was the most responsible, right thing to do from a land stewardship perspective, and they moved forward with it. And I'd say, yeah, there's a tough couple years there, but at this point, the program seems to, you know, achieve the fair level of acceptance, and there's minimal pushback at this point.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Nothing for me. I'm good. Thanks.
Chris?
No, just thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate all your time and input. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I appreciate you having us, and please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions.
Great.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep. And I just want to say that, you know, as you're developing this and going along, don't be afraid to reach out. You know, I welcome the conversation, and I'm happy to help in any way possible.
Absolutely. Well, you know I'll call you.
Yeah. Sure.
All right.
All right, gentlemen.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
Night.
Good night. All right. So we will get back to the agenda. Some standard operating stuff here. We have a quorum. Has everybody read the last meeting's minutes?
Yes.
Any changes, additions, deletions?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. We're gonna, I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in
Those in
favor?
favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Yep. Okay, great. Okay, so that's done. Old business. Chris and Ellie, you guys, related to the forest health assessment. Do we have 3 vendors that we have quotes from?
No, we don't have 3 quotes. We've reached out. We've spoken to vendors, professors at Syracuse University that has a forestry program. And then, actually, I think I contacted DEC and they gave me names of forest ecologists. It's a rather specific.
Yep. So I have.
So not that many foresters do that. We sent all the information out to them, and they were just too busy and they couldn't take on the project.
Okay. So I asked Bernd Blassi to give us a quote.
Oh. Okay.
I'm sure it's going to be expensive, more so than Dr. Miller. So I will ask to see if there's a quote from him, and then I will ask Susan Kalisz if she knows someone that might be able to give us a quote. Just to say that we have 3 so that we can move it along with John. John, am I correct in saying that we need 3 quotes before we can try as part of the process for moving forward with getting a vendor?
Yeah, I'll have to make sure that's okay with finance, but as long as it's a professional service, we should be able to just look at 3. Yeah.
Okay, great. Let us know.
Also, another thing that we could look at, or I can get a quote from, is like the USDA services. I know that CJ was mentioning about just having them a consultation, and so that's going to be expensive, but I can ask and see.
Yep, that'd be great. Thank you, Ellie. I think, Chris, can you reach out to Jax and see if they have a control group at the Nature Center?
Yep.
Because if they've already done the work by setting up deer exclosures, like Dr. Kalisz has said,
yep,
and they have a control, then the question then becomes real simple: is there damage being done, and what is the damage, and what is missing in the understory? And then we can maybe, based on the conversations we've had with Dr. Bagley Miller, with Bernd Blassi, and Dr. Kalisz, kind of say like, okay, we understand that if we're seeing, garlic mustard, and we're not seeing trillium and these other, or red oak, then we know that we have a compromised forest understory, right?
Will do.
Great.
Sure.
And then it won't cost us anything, which is which we will talk about in item D. Stephanie, I know Jasmine couldn't make it. Is there an update from the drone stuff?
Yeah, at this point, we're not really reaching back out to any of the drone vendors that we've connected with. We do have the connections. We have enough folks to proceed forward with putting through any bids. I will tell you that we did get an update today from John. Thank you, John. That for the drone test flight that we were going to do with Michael Coyne of Heat Seekers. I have shared the hold harmless document that we received from John over to him, so he's got it via email to return back to us. Advise that we'll need at least 5 business days notice before we can plan or make aware of the test drone for the PD, for the legal team, and also our recreation department to have awareness. So once we'll get that back from Michael completed, then we'll go ahead and look to try to schedule a flight test. What would be ideal is if we can do it based on the fact that there's snow on the ground, because I think that's optimal for counting as well. So fingers crossed in that aspect.
Yeah. Then I have 2 side items on this one. Number 1 is, so I don't know if everybody read the story in my rye where the guy from Shenorock went for a swim and then was spotted by the police using infrared drone, and then they found him, right? Do you guys remember that story? So the question I have is, do we think it possible, and I guess this is a question for John, that the PD could film the flights, and then we as a collective body count the deer, and then make the calculation to determine how many deer per square mile based on what the flights show us? Is that something that, I don't know, like, I'm asking you, Stephanie and Chris and Ellie, do we think that's a worthwhile thing to investigate because of the budget conversations that the city council has kind of signaled to us?
I'm just hesitant about sort of like the outside community being like, okay, you guys counted the deer. You're biased. You can screw the data. So I think while having an outside source is expensive, it's also giving us an extra protection, an extra source of validation, especially to the community who's already kind of I'm like a little suspicious of us.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fair. The second one is there is a high school.
To support what Ellie's saying, I would think at least the first year, if you did exactly what Ellie was saying, we used a dispassionate third party, and they came back with the numbers. I don't know. Maybe if the cops are ready to jump in on this, great. But maybe going forward, they could.
I would doubt they are. I would think it would be an arm twisting, if anything.
Oh, well then that's academic then.
Yeah. The second one is that there's a high school senior who has a drone license. Henry Shoemaker, who is on was on the varsity football team with my son, and he has a drone license. I asked him, does he think he could do it? And he is going to see if he can do it, and then maybe I would much rather give Henry, who's going to college next year, whatever the money is to count deer than to some person I don't know. But again, it's not a professional. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I really think that we need to look at this in a professional manner, especially related to how the community feels about it already. I mean, I think that's a great idea. It's lovely to consider, but I'm just not comfortable with that.
That's fair. I'm throwing out options.
Ryan, how much is the drone quote?
I think it's like $4,000. Is that right, Stephanie?
Yeah, it was in that range. I mean, it's not a substantial amount of money. I mean, the helicopter surveying was much more substantial, of course. So I really don't see this as being a huge undertaking as far as financials are concerned.
I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I would make a motion that we request the city to approve up to whatever that amount is to hire a drone service and get started and start to get some actual numbers on what's going on.
I think they'll need to see bids, right, to be able to do that? Because I can do that. I can push that forward. I'll get back out to all the vendors that have come forward and that we have maintained relationship with and kept warm up until this point. And I'll get formal bids if that's where we want to go at this point.
I think that's right, and I think that we would want to try and do this in January at a January city council meeting, because the drone is. We're going to want to do this, in the late winter, early spring, when there's no leaves on the trees, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I have one bid officially right now, so for me to get a few more is not problematic.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
And then community outreach. I think this has gone cold for a little bit. Have we made any progress on this since the last meeting?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. All right. So we'll let's circle back, and we'll try and get this going. And then the budget. I think we already talked about this, that we want to come back out.
Also, Ellie and I would like to give you a report on our site visit.
Yeah, please. Just let me get through the budget. I think we just talked about this, that we want to try and go out and try and get a drone flight to count for at least 2 properties or maybe more with to dimension what the size of the herd is, so we at least have a starting point. And then we'll also know kind of what the city's willingness to fund what we're doing. We'll know pretty quickly in January if there's actually something for us to do or there's not, right? So I think that is the move here. Does anyone disagree with that?
No.
No. Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that we're going to come up with 3 quotes and that we will present to the city council to fund a drone flight in either January or February, so that we can get someone.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Ron,
All right.
I just want real quickly interject. Sounds great. Just make sure you give me a couple weeks heads up, because we can get you an agenda item. That way, you know, a presentation in front of the council and everything. But I just,
Yep.
give at least 2 weeks before the meeting. I think we have one meeting on the 7th and one on, I want to say, the 21st of January. And
Okay.
then a couple in February. But just, again, give me that heads up.
Yep.
We'll
Stephanie, I think we want to target the 21st.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm concerned because it's holiday season, of course, and I want to be mindful of people being out of the office and whatnot due to the holidays. I will first thing tomorrow reach out to the additional vendors so they can get it moving.
Okay, great, excellent, thank you.
Sounds good.
John, city manager update. I know we had some data from the DPW that you shared. I also know that there was another car strike on Playland Parkway on I think it was last Sunday. I don't know if you were made aware of that. Have you heard anything else from the DPW?
No, so nothing since I sent you that information. What was it, last week? I haven't asked for an update, so we may have picked up the deer on Playland Parkway, but it's also possible that we pushed it if a call like that came in, that it went to the county because they plow that road. So if it's not in the day, that, you know, obviously it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but with certain county roads, including the Parkway, we just don't do much at all to maintain them or the culverts under.
It'll be interesting to see because there was a Rye cop sitting right in front of it when I.
Then the police should have it. If there was an officer there, then they made a report.
I don't know. So that's do you have anything else for us, John?
No real updates for you guys.
Great. All right, right now we're going to turn it over for the public comment period. The public comment
Do you want to report on what we did?
Oh yes, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say kind of a quick little synopsis of what Chris and I went to.
Yeah, sure. My fault.
No, it's okay. Basically, what they initially did was got a soil test to sort of show the skeptical residents that it's not the soil that's causing the forest to not regenerate. It's the deer, and that's usually done in the early springtime once the soil is starting to thaw. And they did that at they had the one sort of like unified forest while we have separate locations, and so they recommended that either we focus on just one location for the first year to kind of keep it a little bit more manageable and less complex. They really just had a heavy emphasis on forest health and rehabilitation, and he really emphasized on honing in on like a North Star. And so in this case, his North Star was forest rehabilitation, and I think that's valid, because the other conversations. Oops. Sorry, I have a puppy underneath me. The other conversations with car collisions can get a little too complicated, but I also think that that's really important for us to address all sides of our argument. I don't know, Chris, did I mention, I'm sure I missed some stuff. They used the Weckler buck count, the Wexler buck count and Jacobson method, which was the most effective way of trying to find out the deer populations. But Chris, let me know what I missed out.
That's good. I did make a few notes, so I'll just read through whatever I might be redundant. We did meet with C.J. Riley, who seems to be the Irvington naturalist, and also Zoe Hamilton, who's the chair of the Woods Committee. We were there, as well as from Rye DPW came Billy William Weeks and Joe. I didn't get his last name, but he's a Rye DPW employee. Zoe led off by saying that basically their love for all things drove them to the realization that a right-sized deer population is required to allow a wide variety of native flora and fauna to thrive. They did compare and contrast the woods as a forested area with minimal edge forage area versus rye that has more edge forest area, leading them to postulate that rye's deer population should be larger than theirs. Based on what they did, they suggested that establishing a successful deer management program should include stay focused, keep it simple, as Ellie just said, public awareness, continue to update the public on what you're doing, why you're doing it, regular updates and information to the city council, mayor, and the decision makers. Keep them abreast every step of the way so they become educated and knowledgeable for whatever decision they wish to make. Avoid blind spots. One example was what Ellie said about soil. Do some soil tests so you could just have the answer to things that come up. Hire third party, like Ellie was saying, hire third party disinterested individuals or organizations to perform research and documentation to provide to the council and the community to give it an unbiased presentation. And then, why is this important to rye? That was a question that they put to us, and the discussion back and forth. And the priorities are: 1, ecological ramifications. Forest regeneration is paramount concern. Total lack of undergrowth leads to no new growth and forest implosion. 2, major impacts on flooding downstream rye homes that we talked about earlier. Erosion and silting of Blind Brook and Marina, leading to expensive repeat dredging. They also said, you should cite other Westchester or close by successful operations, from Greenwich, Audubon, to what they're doing, T-Town, the Woods, etc. And then, again, back to community awareness. Explain the various deer management options for both public and private properties. Their pluses and minuses. An example, deer bow hunting is a legal option allowed on rye private property. Provide clarity. It is legal, available to rye property owners. Bow hunters have practiced for decades with no incidents, but they must follow the protocols. Hunters and landowners are both protected by New York State liability laws. For deer, and they felt their argument was, their feelings were, for the deer's own sake, is it humane to allow an overpopulation of deer? Their argument was no. The gentleman from DPW mentioned observing deer struggling, wounded by cars, impaled by fences, etc., suffering as they're required to venture into area. And they said, because those guys are out there all the time, they see stuff that most of us in Rye just don't. And also, they felt that they see suffering as these deer end up venturing into areas that are not safe for them in search of food due to competition and limited food sources. CJ mentioned how autopsies have done on deer, and they've discovered that various deer are prematurely aged and less healthy due to the questionable diets. Their conclusion was that the woods there are too many deer for a sustainable, healthy ecosystem. The focus is to provide a balanced, biodiverse offering the opportunity for a wide variety of small mammals, birds, and pollinators to thrive. Also to ensure regeneration of the aging forested areas, which was quite important, which as of now are being threatened by deer grazing on all new growth. Abundance of white-tailed deer, they felt, was the single most negative impact. Again, they said for the deer's own sake, they determined it is better to right-size the herd. Their program includes donating the meat to needy, reducing the argument of just sport hunting, but instead promoting as a necessary act to benefit to the environment, to the health of the herd, and the humans who are needy. And that's what so anyway, that's my report on that.
Great, thank you very much, Chris.
Sure.
Okay. Anybody have, Stephanie, have any questions for Chris?
No.
Okay, great. We're gonna move on to the public comment period. Public can comment for 3 minutes. Let me get my timer. Apologize. So I will call on some, if you want to comment, please, raise your hand using the electronic button that should be in the middle of the screen, and then I will call on you, and then you will have 3 minutes to make your point. All right, Kylie, please go ahead.
I took some notes. For one thing, deer and animal collisions are not the #1 cause of car collisions. That's fact. That's documented by AAA and several other sources. The #1 source of car collisions is drunk driving and distracted driving. I always stress that because the deer get scapegoated for these kind of things, and people are lousy drivers anyway. But they're not the #1 cause. The DEC profits from selling more hunting license. That's fact. I can provide documentation. Anne can supplement that too. She knows about how this works. Julie probably does too. I can give you hard and fast documentation. Flooding. New York City is having severe flooding also, and they have very few deer running around in New York City, but they still have the flooding. As far as deforestation, the building that you guys are sitting in all contributed to deforestation. That was all forest. Where you're sitting was all forest. That was all cut down. The forest was cut down so that you could have the buildings over there. And whatever forest is left, the minute some developer wants to put up some expensive condos, that forest is going to go too. This is all just fact. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at what I wrote down here. As for the Ms. Solis, who encourages handling this problem by having more children kill animals, I'm without speech. I would really have to. I'll send you guys a note about that. I'm really just appalled. I would prefer that whoever is doing this, please don't use the language about take, harvest, etc. You're killing them. You're killing the deer. It makes a difference. People don't accept that kind of language for their own issues. And it's the same for the deer. And as far as killing the deer to help them, I gotta send you guys a note. You don't kill anyone to help them. It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry, I could turn over the rest of the time. Thank you.
Thank you. It's noted. Great.
I have a question.
Sure.
I know Hastings had used the sterile method, Hastings on the Hudson. And has anybody reached out to see how it worked for them? From what I heard, it worked very well. I'm not sure if they're still using it, but I thought maybe if someone should reach out and find out the information on that.
Which, I'm sorry.
Hastings on the Hudson.
For what method?
They use the sterilization method.
Okay. All right. All right.
I believe they were doing it with the Humane Society and Tufts University.
Yeah. Unfortunately, ma'am, You heard from the DEC that they would not provide a permit for us to do that. So we can reach out to Hastings to find out, but the state of New York said they're not going to allow us to do that.
Yeah, well, how is it that Hastings has gotten it?
I don't know.
Well, it would be a good question to ask.
I will ask. Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
Someone named AM had their hand raised a minute ago. I don't know.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Sure. Well, actually, everyone that I wanted to ask questions of has left. But basically, the DEC or the Bureau of Wildlife is in the business of selling permits and getting their excise tax on firearms and ammunition. So I think they're naturally going to promote more hunting, more use of firearms and archery equipment in order to benefit themselves. But if there is an overpopulation at all, if you can show that, then you really have to go to the DEC and say, hey, you can very easily manage for a lower population. They don't want it. They have to have deer, they have to have targets. So you really need to look into what, the DEC is doing, how they're impacting the plants in your garden, the natural environment, whatever else is being blamed on the deer has to be looked at at the DEC.
Okay.
Any comments?
Look, from my perspective, and I'm just going to say that the DEC, the reason why I had EJ join us today was to walk us through, if we came up with a decision, how do we go about getting whatever the decision was. I left it open-ended. I said, can we do sterilization? Can we do DMAP and the culling? Those are the three options that are available through the DEC. He laid out for us what those were. And then we heard last week from Dr. Bernd Blassi of Cornell, and he gave us his view on the most effective methods. And then Dr. Kalisz today gave us her view on what worked, what she's seen worked. And she's a different person completely and I think everybody who saw both of them speak last week would agree that they come at it from completely different angles and they're very vastly different personalities. So I'm going to rely on, my perspective is I'm going to listen to, there's only so much that we can do, and we have to follow what the law is and what the DEC will allow us to do. And then we have to listen to what the experts are telling us. And that's kind of where I stand on it. I'm not an expert in ecology, so I have to listen to the people that are.
Right, but it's also important to look at how the DEC makes its money and why they would recommend hunting over and above other options. So, and they're the ones doing wildlife management, which is obviously a dismal failure. So I think it's important to take a look
That's a correct point.
at where they're coming from.
Okay.
Because this same issue is going on like for decades, and the deer get killed, and it just increases, the population increases because it's all manipulated by the DEC, which Jan knows more about also. But the DEC gets profit off of the more licenses, the better. That's the bottom line with that. We're having meetings with them. I can send you documentation. I know Ann can too. I try to consider a non-lethal approach if it's necessary at all. Just please keep it on the table.
Everything is on the table.
I'm great to hear it.
I have a comment. Also, bow hunting is rather very cruel to the animal because they don't die right away. And it's, to me, it's very dangerous. It's a close community. There may be accidents with humans.
There's been no accidents since 2017, because that's when the data started, in the state of New York for vertical bows. None.
Because they're baiting them.
No.
Well, they're not even, really, the DEC is promoting crossbow hunting now.
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure there will be a lot of accidents.
I don't see crossbow hunting being viable in Rye, legally.
Good.
You can opt out of the crossbow hunting also. I don't know if you're familiar, but you can. Somers has opted out of the crossbow addition to this law. They opted out completely, so you can do that.
That's not for this committee to decide.
I saw someone, Julie,
Yes.
raise their hand a minute ago. I don't know if they'd still like to speak.
No, I mentioned about, crossbow hunting is very cruel. You hit the deer, it runs till it bleeds to death and dies slowly. To me, that's cruelty.
Yes, hi, Buster.
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions. Number one, what happens when the deer, especially with bow, dies in somebody's yard? Because they run when they're hit with bows. They can continue to run to the bow. And if somebody doesn't follow that deer is going to fall somewhere. And suppose it's in somebody's yard.
If I shot a deer,
yes,
and it died in somebody else's yard,
yes,
I would have to ask permission to retrieve the deer.
And if you couldn't follow that deer fast enough, that deer would be pretty quick.
So yes, but that's not how it works.
Well,
the way it works is that if I shoot a deer, and
yes,
I don't want to get too pedantic about it, but if I shoot a deer, I am aiming for what we call the kitchen. The kitchen is the heart and lungs. If I hit it in the heart and lungs, that deer will be gone in 6 seconds. Gone.
Yeah. However, if you don't, or somebody else may not be as good as you.
But so let me finish. So if I do hit the deer, right?
Yes.
And I use the modern broadheads that are available, it will leave a blood trail. You follow the blood till you find the animal. And they're gone in 6 seconds if done properly.
If done properly, that's the word. Okay.
It's a big if.
That's right. My other question is,
Ryan, can I just, Ryan, part of the process that we were talking about, if and when bow hunting was to be permitted, was there was going to be a highly qualified, there's going to be a system of high qualifications for those to be allowed to bow hunt. And they have to demonstrate a high rate of efficiency. Otherwise, they were not going to be allowed. So I think that there are certain blinders that we're putting on whatever we want to do in Rye to ensure that it's a very safe process. Building on the fact, like you said earlier, there have been no incidents since 2017 since they've documented. And also in Rye, there has been bow hunting going on for decades, and there have been no incidents.
no complaints?
In Rye from deer bow hunting to date.
Okay. And my other question is, what's the percentage of forests? I know you have the nature center, and you have, I forget the other center that's down by the water. What's the percentage of forests that you have in Rye versus the entire city?
I don't know.
Well, it's kind of interesting because it's not very much. The forest, there's not much there that you're worrying about the regeneration. There's not a whole lot of area compared to the city itself. I'd like to know if you could provide the answer to that.
Well, so I just want to make sure I understand your question.
Okay.
So you're saying since there's not a lot of forest in the city of Rye, the premise is that we should just let it go away and be decimated and not have any regeneration?
No, I'm not saying that. Well, I'm just asking a question, basically, what the percentage is.
I don't know.
Okay. And the other thing is, somebody had brought this up, I think it was Suzanne, had brought it up. You're talking about the silt in the water. I know Rye, and I know the areas that are being flooded. It's not from deer only. It's a lot of building that's going on. And it's not only taking place in Rye, but all over. It's the building that's destroying trees, and
Correct.
it's not the deer. I mean, deer might be a small portion, but you can't blame the silt and the flooding on deer.
No, I think what Dr. Kalisz said, just to, and I don't want to get in a back and forth. She said that if there were more plants, and whatever the rationale is, if there were more plants,
right,
there was a bigger understory, there were more trees, a larger canopy, then you would have less flooding and less silt. The reasons for that, there's a lot of reasons for that, right? And so this is just one piece of the larger puzzle, is what her point was.
Right, but the thing I guess I'm saying, again, you've got a small percentage of forest, so that you're saying the deer are eating that and it's causing runoff and silt and everything else. But that's a very small portion compared to the amount of building. And the last question I have, Rockland County did something with geese years and years and years ago, and they were going to donate the geese to a senior center or whatever. Well, they decided the geese had stones or whatever in them, and they ended up sending them upstate New York to some senior center there, and they took them. Your deer, aren't you concerned about wasting disease to donate them to a food pantry?
There's no chronic wasting disease in the state of New York.
There isn't? I get information, well, that there are.
No.
But I don't know if I'm on.
Yeah,
Okay. Thanks.
There's possible lead in the deer, and there is no inspection except by DEC people inspecting the meat. So yeah, there's no concern for people and their health. And by the way, the Canada geese that were donated to the senior center, they basically they rotted away. Nobody wanted it.
Yeah. Well, geese don't taste very good, I guess.
it's not that. The people just don't want it. It'll be interesting if they want deer meat, because they're concerned about disease and everything, so.
Correct.
I don't know if that's something that you can push on people.
There are programs that do it, so I don't know what to tell you.
Okay.
Officials have called the deer program, the donation of deer meat, they've called that program putting a Band-Aid on an unacceptable situation. That's by officials. I can send you the quotes on the officials who said it.
Sure. Noted.
Sorry to interrupt you, Buster.
No, that's okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Anybody have anything else?
No? Thank you, Ryan.
Okay. I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Third.
All right. Meeting's adjourned.
It's
Night, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
happy holidays.
Happy holidays to everybody, too. Bye now.